It looked like a car wreck. Twisted bits of metal wrapped precariously around each other and occasionally fused by the heat of a gasoline fire, helped along by the extra fuel of seat cushions and possibly human fat. On top of this pile of scrap, like the angel crowning a Christmas tree, was a 2-foot pole, topped by a skull that had been crudely constructed out of more bits of scrap metal. On the sides of the pole, there were wires bent into the shape of insect wings. Cloth had been pulled taut around them, giving them the appearance of skin, as the setting sun shone through the window behind them. The mere sight of the thing made me feel uneasy. The girl standing next to it, though, had been my best friend since we were 9, and been my lover since we were 16. Her welding mask was pulled up with her red-streaked raven hair peeking out behind it. She'd unzipped her coveralls just enough to reveal the Ramones shirt beneath. In one hand she held her work glove, and in the other, she held the sheet she'd covered the monstrosity with in order to provide the dramatic reveal for me, only moments ago. Her hazel eyes flicked between me and the sculpture with nervous anticipation. She chewed on her bottom lip. There was anxiety written all over her soot-streaked face. "Well," she broke the silence first, and my eyes flicked towards the direction of her voice, my tense standoff with the scrap skull finally broken. "What do you think?" "Heather, I have to be honest with you." I quickly looked back towards the sculpture, then met her eyes once again. "It's probably one of the most hideous things I've ever seen. Looking at it makes me feel terribly uncomfortable." I watched the smile slowly rise on her face before she dropped what she was holding and ran over to me. She threw herself at me and wrapped her arms around my torso, squeezing hard and burying her face in my neck. I could feel her breath on my skin as she laughed. "Really? You're not just saying that, right?" she said through the laughter. "I mean, you know what I'm going for. Maybe I shouldn't have told you, and I want you to be honest with me." "I'm being 100% truthful here, babe." I kissed the top of her head. She smelled like a mixture of her shampoo mixed with a metallic sting of welded scrap. "You nailed the feeling, like something out of hell. I mean, that skull. Something about it's captivating in the most uncomfortable way." She stepped away from me and looked up towards the top of the sculpture. I followed her gaze and found my eyes fixed on it once again. I expected at any moment for the jaw to drop open and hear some kind of wicked laughter pouring out from its mouth. "Okay, so the skull. It may not be entirely my work." She bit her lip again and rolled her eyes back to me. The edges of her mouth were still in a smile. "I kind of found it." "Where the hell do you find something like that?" I chuckled and tore my eyes away from it again. "Was it sitting on the side of the road with a free sign on it?" "It was over at Manny's scrapyard, just sitting in a big old pile of rusted sheet metal. It was missing one side of the face and the lower jaw, so I rebuilt them." She walked over to her workbench, collecting her gloves and the sheet along the way. "You believe that?" "Lucky find." I walked back over behind her and wrapped my arms around her this time. "I mean, it's just the thing this piece needs. Fantastic work, too. Can't even tell it was rebuilt." "Thank you, Cam." Her hand reached up. I felt her fingers run through my hair. "Hopefully I can get it some display time. Going to hit a lot of the outsider art galleries this weekend." "I'll help you load it up. I'm sure it'll kill." I kissed her behind the ear and she cooed with happiness. "I know you worked your ass off on this. I'm proud as hell." "Need a shower," she said as I moved down to kiss her neck. "Care to join?" I quickly nodded in affirmation. She turned to me with a smile and kissed me deeply, while running her fingers through my beard. We left her workshop under the watchful gaze of her piece, the skull's empty eyes fixed on us as we stepped into the house proper. I turned back for one last look before shutting off the lights. I could swear the head had turned, just a little bit in my direction, and a shiver went down my spine. I ended up laughing it off, a trick of the light or possibly just my mind playing tricks on me, and followed Heather to the shower. I woke to feelings of Heather thrashing around in bed beside me. The sheets had become almost entirely wrapped around her, and she screamed like she was being attacked by something. As I tried to wake her up, I took a knee to the gut that nearly sent me backward off the bed. I was able to recover just in time to feel her fingers digging into my thigh so tightly I thought her nails might draw blood. "Heather!" I shouted, as I managed to get the sheets away from her face. "Heather, wake up!" Her feet were still kicking wildly. and her other hand came across her body and nearly struck me in the face. I let go of her and reeled backward to avoid the blow. She suddenly shot up in the sitting position and her eyes sprung open. They were wide and filled with intense fear that seemed to wrap around my spine. She just sat there, shaking for a second, and I didn't know what to do but stare at her and wait for that next moment. I was frozen in place. Her lips started to move like she was mouthing words. At first I couldn't hear her, but she kept repeating it till her voice cracked to life in a heavy breath. "It's here." Her eyes slowly turned towards me and her body started to relax. She lifted her hands to her face like she was about to start playing peekaboo, then suddenly let them fall to her lap. "Heather?" I reached out for her and put my hand on her shoulder. As soon as I touched her, she seemed to wake from whatever trance she was in. "Cam? Oh God, Cam, I just had the worst fucking nightmare!" She threw her arms around me and squeezed tight. I could feel her heart thumping like drums in her chest. It took about an hour and 4 or 5 cigarettes for her to calm down enough to tell me about the nightmare she had. In all the years I'd known her, and the decade we'd been sleeping in the same bed, she'd never had a nightmare like that. It felt like something was trying to kill me. Her voice was shaky as she recounted what she saw in her sleep. But it was like it was coming from inside me, tearing its way through my chest. "Do you remember what happened at the end, when you sat up?" She shook her head no. Her knees were pulled up to her chest. She was hugging her legs. I could see her shivering and wrapped the blanket around her as I continued. "You said it's here, or something like that." I don't know." She cocked her head to the side and looked at me like she was trying hard to remember. Her head dropped into a frown. "I really don't remember that." I honestly wondered if you were awake at that point. Your eyes were wide open. I pulled another cigarette from my pack and stuck it in my mouth. "I've never seen you have a nightmare like that." "It's 'cause I never had a nightmare like that, Cam." She snagged the pack from my hand and lit one for herself before lighting mine. "Never in my fucking life." "It's probably just stress, baby. You've been killing yourself with that last piece." "Probably." She had a pout on her face, but she attempted to curl into a little smile. "Hey, you have to be at work in a few hours. We should probably get some sleep." "You sure? I don't mind staying up a bit longer with you." "Just till we finish these." She held up her cigarette between her forefinger and thumb. "Maybe talk about something else in the meantime?" We finished our cigarettes. Talked about other things to calm ourselves down. Just a nightmare. A bad one. But still, just a nightmare. The next day I came home from work to find Heather in the workshop again. She was sitting and staring at the sculpture as if it was about to divulge some universal secret. She didn't even turn her head when I stepped into the room and started walking towards her. "Hey, babe." I expected her to turn her head when she heard my voice, but she didn't even acknowledge my presence. She was transfixed. I took a few steps closer and reached out to wave my hand in front of her face. "Hey, babe," I repeated. She turned to look at me slowly, a calm smile spreading across her face. Her eyes were wide and looked glassy. "You okay?" I asked with a nervous little laugh, afraid to admit that she was creeping me out a little. "Oh, I'm fine," she returned to look at her sculpture again. "Just been thinking about how the new piece feels like it's missing something, don't you think?" I looked at the sculpture and my eyes went directly to the scrap metal skull adorning the top. It looked as if it had turned just enough to stare directly at it, and I could swear its mouth had dropped open just a little bit. "Did you move the skull a little bit?" I heard a nervous tone had crept into my voice. I didn't really know why at the time, but something about the whole situation was making me feel really uneasy. Heather shook her head no and flicked her big hazel eyes in my direction again. "So, do you think it could use something else? But you said you were all done. You seemed pretty satisfied with it yesterday." "Oh, I thought I was." She finally got to her feet and walked over to her project, running her fingers over the twisted metal of the base. "When I came back in to look at it today, though, I don't know. It just struck me as missing something that I can't quite put my finger on." I took another look at it, closer this time. It still made me feel really uncomfortable. The first time she revealed it to me, I got a feeling like I was looking at something that I understood. Something from the mind of the girl I loved most in the world. Heather had always tried to make her art invoke somewhat dark and disturbing responses. It was just her style. But this was different now. The base looked even more twisted than I remembered, more jagged. Each individual bit of scrap metal looked tinged with new spots of bronze rusting. I hadn't noticed the first time. The spaces between looked darker despite the fact that there was more light in the room. The pole that had held up the skull looked more curved and spiral, and the wings that branched off the side took on an even fleshier tone. Did you... I paused when I thought I saw the skull turn slightly, but it was so slight that I wondered strongly if it was just my mind playing tricks. Did you do any work on it today? She shook her head no again. I couldn't decide what I wanted to do. It looks different to me. Like it's darker. More twisted. Well, that's what I was going for, Cam. She smiled and stepped over to me with her hands on her hips. That's when I noticed the way she was moving was just a little off. Nothing overt, just like the sculpture. She just wasn't moving like her. I began to wonder if something was wrong with me. I don't know. Maybe I'm just tired. I tried to laugh it all off. I really was exhausted. Neither of us had slept well the previous night due to the nightmare, and I had been on edge all day. It was an easy jump to make that my mind might be a little foggy. Poor baby. She put her hands in my hair and lowered my face to kiss my forehead. Sorry I kept you up all night. All over that silly dream. Honestly, it's really not as scary as I thought it would be. I snapped my head up and pulled away and looked into her eyes. What did you just say? She backed up a little bit, clearly shocked by my reaction. I said that it was a silly nightmare and there's nothing to be scared of. Her voice was shaky and off. My head started to hurt and my stomach started to feel sick. No, you said it's not as scary. What did you mean by that? The scene of her staring wide-eyed into the darkness and saying, "It's here," replayed in my mind. To be honest, that moment had been on my mind most of the day. I was talking about the dream. She stepped toward me again and grabbed my hand. I felt her thumb caress mine. Cam, are you okay? Yeah. I lowered my head, wondering why the hell I just acted so accusatory. Everything just felt off. I did my best to justify it as me being tired again, but there was a nagging doubt lingering in the back of my head that wouldn't go away. I'm just exhausted. My head is killing me. I'm sorry. It's okay, baby. Heather wrapped her arms around me. I tried to ignore that. Even the way she hugged me felt wrong. Let's go have dinner. You can get some sleep. I nodded, and we left the workshop. As we walked through the door, I was far too aware of the eyes of the skull on my back. The second we left the workshop, I started to feel better. I told myself it was the beer I downed, and the bowl of pasta I ate that righted me. But just like the nagging doubt in my head hadn't left, I knew on some level that it was because I was no longer in the presence of that thing in the garage. At the time, it seemed so crazy, though, that I refused to entertain the idea beyond my subconscious, no matter how much I regret that now. That night I had the nightmare. I was walking through what looked like the hallway that connected my bedroom and the living room. It was dark, but off in the distance I could see a pulsing light that almost seemed to beckon me. As I walked, I could feel a growing unease about both my destination and what was behind me. I could feel my heart thud in my chest as I alternated before looking over my shoulder and forwards toward the light. At first, there would be nothing behind me but more hallways stretching off into the darkness, but soon, the smell of wet, rusty metal would fill my nostrils and the taste of blood would fill my mouth. I would look over my shoulder one last time and something would be there. Its features never came into view. It stood in mostly silhouette and barely lit by the dim glow in the distance. It had a torso that was nearly human but thin and emaciated and no more the size of a child, but its long limbs caused it to tower over me. Its legs were bent out to either side, but even in the squat position it had to duck its head to avoid the ceiling. Its arms were of proportionate length and bent upward so its palms were pressed against the ceiling. 2 green pinpoints of light shone from where its eyes should be, and they followed me in the same way that damn skull did as I started running. The thing gave chase, working its spindly appendages like some kind of oddly designed machine. Every time that I would look over my shoulder, it would be switching positions, crawling along the walls or ceiling and keeping pace better than I could possibly expect. I could feel the carpet beneath my feet turn to cold, rough metal, and my lungs would burn as I pushed myself harder towards a place I was terrified to go. In the light, I could hear whispers that were in Heather's voice. Cam, it's here. Cam, it's right behind you. Cam, it wants something from you. Oh God, it wants to take me, Cam. Help me, help me. I could feel it reaching out from behind me, ready to grasp me by the neck. Just before it could touch me, I reached the light, and that's when the sound of screams would wake me up. My own screams. I shot up in bed. My body was soaked in sweat and I needed to suck in a few labored breaths to calm myself. My hand reached out for Heather only to find her side of the bed empty. My heart sunk a little bit as her voice from the dream echoed in my head. "Oh God, it wants to take me, Cam." "It was just a dream," I said out loud to myself. "Just a dream." I knew sleep wasn't going to be an option after a little while, so I decided to get out of bed. I needed a drink of water, a cigarette, and found Heather was probably already up. As I reached for the bedroom door, I felt a cold draft hit me from beyond it, as if a breeze had come through the wood just to chill the sweat on my skin. I shook my own head back and forth, both in a statement of disbelief and an attempt to wake myself up. You'd be surprised how easy it is to dismiss the unexplainable when it keeps itself small. The chill persisted as I stepped out into the hallway. I looked to my right towards the bathroom and saw the door was standing open with the light off. "She's not in there," I thought before looking in the other direction and seeing a dim light at the other end of the hall. It was coming from Heather's workshop, and it looked eerily similar to what I'd seen in my dream. A shudder worked its way through my body as I started to take steps in that direction. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see the long-limbed thing wreathed in shadow and racing towards me. My heart thumped in my chest as I drew closer and closer to the workshop. I expected to hear sound, music, clanging metal, the hiss of a welding torch at work. The sounds that always poured out of Heather's workshop when she couldn't sleep. It was silent, though. The only sign she was even there being the light. "Heather?" I called out as I got closer. My hand was already out in front of me, prepared to open the door. "Heather, you in there?" No response, just continued silence. I shot another glance over my shoulder at the empty hallway. It felt like my heart was in a vice grip as my fingers touched the handle. "Heather," I called again. Something deep inside told me not to open the door. Then my fingers turned the knob and I pushed. I was instantly hit by the smell of something awful burning and the smoke that stung my eyes. Both forced me to turn away and shield my face. My stomach did a dance inside me, threatening to let my dinner loose. I slowly turned my head back towards the now open workshop door. I could see that damn sculpture through a haze of smoke and the squint in my eyes. As my vision cleared, I could see that it had changed again, and the image was processed in my mind. The horrible realization of what I was seeing struck me like a freight train and sent me reeling away from the door. I tried to scream, but instead my stomach finally made good on its threat and I vomited through coming tears. Heather had been welded into her own statue. Although the only way I could tell it was her tattoos. Her naked body was standing with her back pressed against the base and her arms pulled back and welded in place with random bits of sheet metal. The skin around these bonds had been burned nearly down to the bone and the blackened bits of char ran up nearly to her shoulders. The same had been done with her legs as well, and it became all too clear that the horrid smell that hit me when I first opened the door was a smell of burnt flesh. Her head wore a crown of nails driven in around her hairline. The skin had been flayed from one side of her face. Her jaw had been removed, leaving her tongue dangling down from the back of her throat. Something had split her body open from neck to groin, and the contents were spilling out in front of her. The entire floor around the base of the statue was drowning in blood, and someone had used it to write along the floor in front of her. Finally finished. I wanted to get back to my feet and make a mad dash back to my room to grab my phone. I was frozen in total shock, though, and instead sat on the floor covered in my own vomit, crying and repeating the same phrase over and over again. I need to call the police. Suddenly, I heard something from deeper inside the workshop, and my heart filled as if turned into rock in the middle of my chest. Like footsteps moving closer and closer. I tried to slide away backwards, the most movement I could muster, and instead just slipped in the mess that I made all over the floor. The source of the sound came into view in the doorway, and for the first and last time I laid eyes on the thing from my dream in the real world. This time, it was not wreathed in all kinds of shadow. I could see it clearly. Its long, spindly limbs forced it to duck. Even in the high ceiling of the workshop, its torso was so thin you could see the bones shift under its pale skin as it walked somehow, making it seem as impossible as it made it seem real. As it stepped in front of the doorway fully, it turned its head to look at me with its beady little green eyes. Without taking its eyes off me, it reached out and caressed Heather's hair before reaching towards the top of the statue and plucking the skull from where it rested on top of the pole. With a quick spidery movement, just like I remembered from my dream, it shot through the doorway and leaned down face to face with me. The thin line that ran horizontally across the bottom of its mostly featureless face split open to reveal a mouth that took on the appearance of a crude smile. "I am the muse. Can you not hear my song?" It spoke in a soft and almost welcoming voice. The comforting tone made me feel even more terrified than if it sounded like the devil itself. It pinched the scrap skull between its bony fingers and held it up to my face, as if it were a point of pride. I need to call the police. The phrase stuck in my throat like a song on repeat. The duty of a muse means my work is never complete. Again, it smiled in a way that was so warm, juxtaposed against the situation. It made everything seem more uncomfortable. It rose up and walked back towards the sculpture again. I saw it stare longingly at the corpse of the woman I loved. You could sense a sadness from the creature. Tears rolled from my eyes, and I felt like throwing up again. It pressed the scrap skull close to its chest and looked at me one last time before scrambling off towards the window, leaving a trail of blood behind it as it skidded through the puddle at its feet. I heard the window break, and in my mind's eye I could see its spindly limbs squeezing their way out into the night and scuttling down the street. I fell flat on the ground, soaking in my own tears and trying to wrap my mind around what had just happened. I'd lost the only woman I'd ever loved to something I can't even begin to explain, some creature that seemed to see itself as a muse. My mind was broken. I wanted so badly to scream, but all I could do was lay there on the floor in a puddle of my own sick and tears. Too scared to look up again and see what it had done to my Heather. All I could do was lay there, then repeat the same phrase over and over again. The last unbroken and coherent thought I had. I need to call the police.